So, hello everybody, I'm Simone Marchetti, Vanity Fair European editorial director, and I'm very proud to be here presenting and moderating an important panel that we called Fashionscapes Living Wage. And let me go straight to the point and introduce all the panelists. So I'm starting with Livia Firth. Hello, Livia, co-founder and creative director, EcoAge. Then Kalpona Akter. She's the founder and executive director of Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity. Then we have Jessica Simor, one of the leading human rights lawyer in the world. And then Marisa Selfa, North Sails CEO. And last but not least, Andrew Morgan, founder of Untold and multiple award-winning filmmaker. So, Livia, let me start from you. We are here to talk, first of all, about a movie. And we know how important nowadays is to bring values through storytelling. And the most contemporary, powerful storytelling are movies and series. So tell me more about this project.
Hi, everyone, first of all, and if I speak very loudly, it's because I've been told that my microphone doesn't work well by my director-in-chief, Andrew Morgan. The Fashionscapes series was started by Andrew and myself a few years ago after Andrew involved me in the True Cost documentary, which he directed in 2014, and is a documentary, really, we can say, that changed completely the narrative of fashion, and particularly fast fashion, and started a real movement. It's a documentary that is still screened in a lot of schools around the world that people still talk about, but it's very much a documentary about the devastating effects of fast fashion and fashion today in the world, both from an environmental point of view and mostly from a social point of view. So after True Cost, how do we also inspire the consumer about solutions? How do we tell them, if this is the problem, what is the way forward? And so we created Fashionscape as a short form documentary series. Each documentary is 12 minutes, so it's quite short for people's attention. And we went to Australia to look at wool supply chain. We went to Guatemala to look at artisans production. We went to Botswana to look at diamond mining. And then last year, when COVID exploded and the repercussions on garment workers around the world were devastating, because they were not only getting sick like the rest of the world, but they were also losing jobs in millions because the brands started canceling orders without any responsibility for it. Andrew and I said, we need to tell this story again. And I was, as a founding member of Annie Lennox, The Circle NGO, with Jessica Simor, project within the Circle with lawyers all over the world on the first proposal in the world for a legislation on living wages. We knew that that was our solution. And so we said, okay, let's create a Fashionscape that can come out when Jessica will submit the first proposal in the world to the EU Commission. And so we tell the story and we make people understand how important it is that, people on the other side of the world, like Kalpona, who produce our clothes, are treated with dignity and respect, the same dignity and respect that we want for ourselves. So this is the story of the movie behind. And as a side note, because we couldn't travel, Andrew put up this incredible machine where we had crews in London filming Jessica and myself, crews in Bangladesh, crews all over the world, where people were filming myself as I was talking to them on Zoom, and they were filming them as they were talking to me on Zoom. So it didn't feel like a movie shot on Zoom. Selfa was our angel supporter who made sure that we could make this movie, and No Sails has been the most incredible partner ever and very courageous partner. So when you hear from Marisa, you will know why. She's one of the most courageous women I've ever met, together with Kalpona and Jessica, of course.
Livia, thank you very much. You are touching, as always, very important points. So first of all, inspire consumers. That's super important. And we have to bring stories and engagement, not only the sense of punishment, because it's about empowerment of everyone. And at the same time, the values of dignity and respect are essential. So coming to you, Kalpona, when we think about Bangladesh, we of course think about the tragedy of Rana Plaza. And I think that within the COVID, the situation, the current situation was even worse. So can you, first of all, can you tell me more about your background and then about the current situation after this pandemic?
The background of me or background of factories?
I think both of them. I think that your story is related to the country history.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Simone, and thank you, everyone in the panel and who join in this discussion. So, to giving a brief background of Bangladesh garment industry, it is the second largest apparel exporters in the world, and it's women dance industry. We have majority of young women who working for this industry, and we consider this a economical backbone of our country. So the garments earn 80% of our foreign exports. So this is really important, but workers never treated that importantly the industry, how importance has given to this industry. Anyway, so I started working in age of 12 when my father got ill and there was no one in the family who can bring food in the table for 7. So my mom started, and she couldn't continue because we have a baby sister at home. She was just 2 months old and mom had to stay at home and take care of her. So she decided, and she spoke to me. So we both decided me to go to the factory to work. And after me, it was my 10 years old brother who went to the factory. And we were making $6 a month, working over 400 hours. So that tells that how sweatshop the working condition was. And also that tells that how poverty wages we would be making. If my mom would be given a living wage, I don't need to go to the factory. My mom could literally hire a nanny for my baby sister, and I couldn't go to school with my brother and sisters. But living was an issue then 30 years back, and even now. So I'm happy and unhappy. I'm unhappy because I had to, go to the factory in that age. I couldn't go to the school, but I'm happy that even being a child worker, today I can give a voice locally and globally to ensure a living wage for workers. And I will keep fighting with all these amazing people. Those are in front of the screen at this moment. And we'll make sure that, there is no more child labor in the factory who really need to come to work because their parents not being paid a living wage. So my journey in these 31 years to eliminate sweatshop from the industry, to give a better working condition to our workers through negotiation, through collective bargaining agreement, as well as to bring these brands and retailers responsible for their supply chain. So we don't see any more homicide like Rana Plaza in our country. So more, in one sentence, what I'm fighting for a job with dignity. And a dignity will not come until we have a living wage, until we have a safe workplace, until we have a union rights at our workplace, and also a factory that is not gender-based violence free. So I'm just fighting for these, and I'm so amazed that I was able to speak in this film that Livia and Andrew worked for, and I'm really hope that many people will watch it, and the consumers will themselves, and they would be raising voice, make responsible everyone in the policy level as well as in business level to get this legislation adopted and making sure the workers in production country are getting living wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpona. I think that your words, I keep fighting, gives a light to all your commitment and what we really need. And do you think that after Rana Plaza, something has changed? I mean, in a good way.
Yes. Thank you for asking a good, this question. Yes, of course. After Rana Plaza, because of Rana Plaza, a global outcry was there. So the government has pressure to our government. The consumers got really angry because the world media has covered what has happened in Rana Plaza, and everyone knew. It was so black and white to understand that this accident was preventable. So, due to all our effort together in locally and internationally, we were able to bring all the brands, majority of the brands who are sourcing from our country, to sign on a legally binding agreement, which we call Accord on Bangladesh Fire and Building Safety. And Accord has made a phenomenal change in the ground, which has, inspected factories where they have found over 120,000, electrical fire and structural hazards. Many of them has been corrected, but it's still, a long way to go. But at least we can say a 2.2 million workers, or about 2 million workers, are working in a safe workplace these days. So this was a positive change, but this change needs to be sustained. Now there is a campaign we just launched, or we are campaigning on the international brands to sign on the Accord again, because Accord has been expired, and local group like manufacturers and brands, they have created called RMG Sustainable Council, but brands are not legally obligated on that. But we need this brand's legal obligation, because without that, no one will be, make a real change. For years, we have seen all these empty promises that brand was giving through their COC, Code of Conduct, or CSR, but this self-monitoring never been helped. So we still need these brands to commit to sign this legally binding agreement. So far, we have 2 brands who already committed to sign the international accord, which will be ensure safety in Bangladesh and also other production countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and other countries where we are facing the accident at this moment. So those are Chibo from Germany and ASOS. And we are hoping that all other brands who are talk so much and says that they will be buying ethically, they do have a lot of commitments, they will be step up. Otherwise, we'll be chasing them to the end, because the positive change that has been made need to be continued. You need to unmute.
Sorry, excuse me, I'm just on mute. No, it's really important, and brand embrace this change totally and with authenticity. But I deeply think that it's not only about production and produce in a good way as well. It's not only about consuming in a good way, but it's about making laws. So because laws at the end makes culture makes the change, and the change makes a better world. So coming to you, Jessica, I want you to introduce your latest report, Fashion Focus, a proposal for a new European legislation on a living wage. Can you tell us more about that?
Thank you, Simone. So I suppose I should start by saying that the real inspiration, the true inspiration for all this is the True Cost film, an extraordinary film that really, I mean, I've shown it at my workplace, and I think it should be shown in schools. So I would encourage everyone to share it and watch it. Now followed up by the new Fashionscapes that introduces this proposed legislation. And as Kalpona said about Rana Plaza was preventable. And what struck me when I watched True Cost was that everything that is happening and the payment of poverty wages is completely preventable. There's nothing inevitable about any of this. So we set about our project to try and find a solution to what is essentially a market failure. And the proposal is intended to tackle that market failure, which is the mobility of demand, as well as access to excess of supply in the garment and footwear sector. And whilst the problem of poverty wages isn't confined to that sector, it's clear that it is an area where it's been an intransigent and long-standing problem, particularly with the growth of fast fashion. In this industry, we see labor, mostly female labor, being treated like any other commodity, water, minerals, and the purchaser moves to find the cheapest level at which it can purchase this commodity. But that market behavior ignores the most basic principle that labor is not a commodity like any other. It's the means by which human beings should be able to achieve a decent life for themselves and an improvement of their lives, and that for them and their families and dependents. And we have to recognize that the economy has no purpose of its own. Its purpose is to improve the well-being of people. And the core of this is that human beings are entitled to a minimum wage, that is a wage that can sustain a basic decent life. And that's been explicitly recognized for more than 100 years, going right back to 1919 in the Treaty of Versailles. And it's repeatedly been recognized in international agreements and recommendations. But the basic idea that no one should be paid so little that they cannot sustain themselves and their family is deeply rooted in international human rights law, which is founded on and recognizes the inherent dignity of every human being. So the problem with mobility of demand for labor in this sector and high availability of labor creates a disincentive for garment producing states to increase their statutory minimum wage. The risk of increasing their wages is that the purchaser, the retailer, maybe the brands, simply moves to a cheaper location, cheaper source for that labor. And the result, of course, is that no more than poverty wages are paid. So the essential objective of this proposal is to reverse that race to the bottom, to create an incentive for garment producing countries to increase their statutory minimum wage, and to induce factories also to pay more to their workers as a means of keeping brands using their services. So if I just turn to the proposal, I'm only going to share very briefly one bit, if I can actually find it. I thought I'd put it up on my screen now. Maybe I can't. Why is it not there? Well, never mind. Maybe I. Sorry, I've messed this up. I can't actually find it. I had actually produced it on my screen. But anyway, if you go to the Circle report, you'll find on page 12 of that report a sort of summary of the proposal. The heart of the idea is that the European Commission, possibly in conjunction with the ILO, shall work out for main garment producing countries the minimum wage that's necessary to sustain a basic decent life, and that will be called the wage risk point. And if the statutory minimum wage falls below that level, the country will be listed on an annex. Similarly, if the country doesn't have a right to freedom of association or collective bargaining, that too will be a basis for putting the country on the annex. And there'll be a 3-year transition period so that states can adjust their position in order to avoid being on that annex. But if a country is listed on that annex, then retailers and importers that buy their goods from that country will be bound by heightened due diligence obligations in the regulation. And the annex will be subject to annual reconsideration. So every year there'll be a reconsideration of where that wage risk point should be fixed. The consequence of this should be that companies will know that if they use those countries for the production of their goods, then they will be subject to not just additional due diligence obligations, but potential sanctions. So they'll want to be extremely sure that the factories pay proper wages, but also it is likely that countries will have the incentive to increase their minimum statutory wage in order to retain that investment. The due diligence obligations will apply first at the stage of import. So the importer will have to declare that it has taken all reasonable steps to ensure that the workers who made the goods were paid more than the wage risk point and that collective bargaining rights were guaranteed. And if the importer is not the trader who will sell the goods, it shall be required to get an undertaking from the trader. So if you're a brand who uses, say, an agent or buys through another body, you will have to give an undertaking to the agent so that they can sign that import declaration. There are then going to be additional due diligence obligations that apply to the retailer selling those goods, including that it must assess that a living wage is paid, and that will require it to engage in what a living wage means, which will be more than simply saying a point above the wage risk point, because we don't want the wage risk point to be a floor. We want it to be a floor, we don't want it to be a ceiling. So we want the retailers to engage actively in really deciding what is a living wage truly. And then there will be transparency and reporting obligations. And there will also be competent authorities in member states which will carry out ex post market surveillance, checks and cooperations between member states and enforcement bodies. And finally, there will be infringements, penalties and sanctions, including financial sanctions. And we hope that this will mean that members of the board will be actively engaged in this question and therefore will be responding in terms of both ensuring that their goods are made by individuals who are paid properly, but also engaging potentially with the relevant garment producing states. And if there are fines, those fines will be paid into a central fund. Now, ideally, that money would go back to the workers, but we have recognized that that may technically be extremely difficult. So where it is not possible, it is money that would be used by the Commission to assist in helping and compensating workers generally. So this report is at the stage now where we've sent it to the Commission. We're seeking to engage with people in the European Parliament, in the Council of Ministers, and of course we need every kind of support possible. No doubt there are imperfections in it, there are things that are not going to work, and we also need help and support in engaging in those questions and making it better and really practically workable. Thank you.
Thank you to you very much. I mean, I think that engaging people into questions, it's essential. Maybe it's one of the most important things that we can do now. And I think that the ones who are doing it brilliantly and with a really an amazing engagement are TV series. So coming to you, Andrew, I think that nowadays we are really living a kind of visual era, and an era where TV series are our new literature, maybe our new newspapers, our new media of information. And so this is why I think that your project is really important. So may you please tell me more about that, how it was generated, how was filming it, and how much did you love doing it?
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I'm in awe of the people on this call, and it's really one of the honors of my life to call them friends. And so, I mean, making this was a real joy. Every time I work with Livia, it's a joy. We've had a really long-running relationship now, and I think in a lot of ways I'm still recovering from the years that I spent traveling and witnessing some of the effects of this industry around the world. There's not a lot of days I don't wake up and just sort of, I think like a lot of us, try to make sense of this really profoundly disorganized world that we find ourselves living in. And you know, I've had this journey myself of going from a place of really feeling very guilty and ashamed of some of the privilege and power that I've just been born into by no work of my own, to then just sort of like really wanting to roll up my sleeves and use it for what matters, and to seek out the people who are doing really ferocious work and to put a spotlight on them. And every time I do work in this area, on this industry, along these lines, I come away profoundly inspired. I mean, I'm inspired just listening to them talk this morning. But I think it's really crucial. You know, I think like in a lot of ways, we have normalized really grotesque poverty, and we've institutionalized profound inequality when it comes to this industry. And I guess my job, I'm not as smart as Jessica, I'm not as experienced as Kalpona. My job is just to try to put a human face on what that looks like, because a lot of times I think we can sort of hold the world at a distance when it feels unknowable or so big, or the numbers are so broad, or it touches all these countries. But this is a profoundly personal industry in that it touches human beings. And we are making choices actively as consumers, as government bodies, as citizens, to either normalize and go along with a story that has been profoundly written to advantage a very small number of people at the expense of a vast sum of the world's working poor. We can normalize that, we can participate in that, we can look away from that, or we can choose to sort of put real honest glasses on, look at it for what it is and say, this could change, this has to change in our lifetime. And I think what's really exciting about this moment, and a lot of the energy that Livia's brought, is we've been talking about this stuff for a long time. And there was a moment where these were new ideas. There was a moment where there just wasn't awareness. There was a moment where, but we're at a place now where we actually can measure the impact this industry is having in real time. We're at a place now where it is not accidental to further entrench systems of poverty in supply chains that generate profit for billion-dollar corporations. It is not, and it's naive to act like we don't know. So now I think what Jessica's talking about, what Kalpona's talking about, we're at this place where we're saying, okay, we have to start to take some steps that lead to real action. And we have to take this conversation beyond a theoretical one to a place where it actually improves the lives of people. And when you talk to folks like Kalpona or workers all over the world, they say, we want to work and we want to get paid enough to live. I mean, basic, essential human rights, like ground floor of humanity kind of stuff. So the purpose of this project, the purpose of all this work is to try to move us in that direction. And I'm constantly grateful and inspired just to play a little part in that.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm very impressed by your words. You're saying that our choice is are able to normalize poverty, and of course also to institutionalize injustice. So I think that most of the things that you are saying are on us, and we have to make a decision. But we have talked about, and we have seen the energy of Livia, the commitment of Kalpona, the work of Jessica, and your creativity, Andrew. But at the end of the day, we really need someone who can pay the bill of our work. And it's really important. I think brands has the responsibility to understand this and to use their power to help the change. This is why I want to move to Marisa, and the support of North Sales was fundamental and essential. So Marisa, can you tell me more about the support that you have gave to this project?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really humbled to be around this amazing panel with such a drive for change and to have a big voice. So very honored to be here. Well, to me, I've been in the fashion business for a long time, and I truly say that to me today, fashion without sustainability is really irresponsibility. And the only reason why I'm still in fashion personally is because I think there is an area that we can all change if we commit and really become accountable and responsible. So from a very humble place, I can tell you that, there's been a lot of talk in the last few years, even more than ever, about what it is sustainability. There's a lot of amazing steps the fashion industry is going through. Some brands doing it from a really core and truly way. Some others because they believe is the thing that we're supposed to be doing now. And sometimes it's because the consumer is asking for it. But I have to say that 90%, for not saying 95% of the talks that I am involved in and that I hear is about recycled material, eco-design, circular economy. There's a lot around that, but sustainability is not just about the planet, it's people and planet. And I believe, there was a lot of knowledge in the past. As Andrew was saying, everybody knows what we are supposed to be doing. And somehow the people and the social part is becoming, in my personal opinion, a bit more in the shade today because everybody is so focused about having sustainable collections. And I think there's no way we can talk about planet without people. So for the brands, we have the responsibility. This is not a wish. This is not a nice press release. This is not a marketing campaign. We, the leaders of each company, have the responsibility to make basically what we're talking about is just the basic core of business is paying a living wage for all the people that are making our clothes. And so I think, the brands need to have this at the core of the priorities because there is no point in talking about our business model and how well we're doing our product. What an amazing campaign if the people that we are having making the clothes are just having the situation that Kalpona was explaining in such a true and credible way. So to me, it was no brainer. I met Livia, and obviously Livia has this amazing energy and commitment, and she was explaining to me this new project. Obviously, I knew how great Livia and Andrew have been working in the past, telling stories. And to me, it was a no-brainer that we really wanted to help, not because we're perfect, because nobody's perfect. And definitely fashion has a lot to work on. And North Sales, we're definitely working in every single area that we can to get better and better. But to me, it was a way to help to have this big speaker out there telling the story. And, we've been very, very, very proud to be part of it. I have to say as well that definitely the fashion industry has a lot of work to do, and we all, as I said, need to commit to it. But I also want to flag, if I may, the consumer responsibility, because on one way, yes, the brands definitely need to do the right thing, but the consumers are so savvy and they're so amazing on sustainable products more and more. And I think they need to start having the tough decisions that we are taking in the business. So from my point of view at the business, we take very difficult decisions. Sometimes we don't produce certain things because they're not the right level of sustainability, or we don't produce in a certain factory because we know they're not going to respect the rights that we want. And that sometimes, means you're earning less money, or you're not producing certain quantities, or you need to move your production last minute, and that may make you lose some money. And at the same time, we need to do that. So the consumer, the final consumer, is the one that will speed up as well if they really push the brands. And if they go and buy a €3 or €5 t-shirt, they have to know that probably that brand is not paying the right level of wages to their factories. So I do believe the final consumer has a lot to push all of us and the brands to do the right thing in a faster way.
Thank you very much, Marisa. I think that at the end, commitment of a brand, of people like Livia, Kalpona, Andrew, and Jessica, is a kind of a virtuous circle that brings change and positiveness to everyone. But then I will go straight to the questions that our audience is sending for you. So the very first question is for Jessica. Jessica, it's for you. So what is the next step in the legislative process? And how is the lawyers' circle being supported in this campaign?
Good question. So you're probably aware that the Commission itself is supposed to be coming up with a due diligence proposal for its own directive. And that's been postponed again. It was supposed to be in April, then it was postponed to June, and it's now been postponed to September. And our intention was to release our proposal just before their proposal in April, which we did, but of course their proposal has not come, in order to participate in the debate that will take place about the EU due diligence legislation, which will happen at some point, even if it's later than we hoped. So what we need to do is we need to find sort of lead advocates inside. And we're at the stage of doing that. We're at the stage of starting discussions with people, getting meetings with people. So, I mean, that's certainly something that we could really do with help on. We need as much support as we can, including financial support, because we don't have, we've done everything on basically nothing. So we do need financial support for this. We could do with a project director, a properly supported and funded project director. It's definitely a complex exercise. When multinational companies or even small companies are involved in lobbying in relation to legislation, they appoint big PR companies, which are expensive. We obviously don't have that. But I think, anything that anybody can suggest, whether they can contribute contacts, PR people, money, or any other resources or ideas, that would be incredibly welcome. So we'd be very grateful for that. And please just get in touch with myself, with Livia. We'll be delighted to hear from you. Livia, is there something you would add to that?
I think if you go on the Circle website, the Circle NGO website, there are all the information there on how you can help on the campaign.
Great. So, Kalpona, there's a question for you. And the question is, how can individuals and consumers support to get a living wage for workers?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, a consumer, what they do now they just go to a store and see the price tag or see the color or measurement of the clothes. That's it. But I would ask the consumers to go beyond. They should start asking the question in the store that they wanted to know more about this worker, whether these workers has been paid a living wage or not. An individual consumer, they might thinking that, a single voice would be, not matters, but it does matter. It will be ringing, that store manager had to report to their bosses that, we are getting this kind of questions from our consumer. So this is one way that consumer can raise their voice. A consumer also a citizen of the countries, right? So in the Europe, they can definitely reach out to their policymakers the best way they know, and asking the policymakers to endorse this legislation. That would be the second. And third and fourth is get involved. The circle, go to the Circle website. There is a lot of documentation materials you can read on, and support the programs that Circle do, and also support the programs, the documentary that Andrew, Livia, and us, we are working together, because as as many people as can know about it, I think there's many support we can get on living ways. So there are many ways to help. Get involved, no more, raise your voice and act.
Thank you, Marisa. There's a question for you, a very important one. In some ways a little tricky, but I think it deserves a good answer. I know you will give it a good answer. So the question is, do you think it should be compulsory for brands to have internal audits and due diligence to ensure they are really supporting their garment workers?
Okay, so when we talk,
go ahead.
It is for me.
No, that's for Marisa, but if you have something to add.
Please.
Oh, sorry. No, I was really confused.
Go ahead.
No, you go first. Then I will be talking about this.
Well, I was going to say definitely yes. I would love that. I think, unfortunately, until it's not compulsory, some companies, they don't have to comply to it. I mean, the companies in general, they should be doing their own auditing. I mean, we have our own code of conduct and we do our own auditing, but it's just for us to make sure that, we're doing the right thing, and we are getting the production at the factories that we think, because that's the other thing. Sometimes you hire a factory and maybe that factory subcontracts in a different place. So we do our own auditing, but I would love if there was, if it should be compulsory, then why not? The people that do it will not be afraid, and the people that don't do it will have to do it. Obviously, that will mean a cost for the company, which has to be put in the budget, but it would be a good way to make sure that happens. It's really a good question. But please, Kalpona, what do you think? I'm sure you're agreeing with this, huh?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little more, with all respect, that, the self-auditing is great, but it should bring transparency. The audit should be public. Otherwise, it is difficult to make sure that whether those audits really helping people who are making clothes or products for you all, because the audit traditionally, it is not unannounced. It is announced. So factory management get enough time to coach workers on what to say. So the audits, those are taking place like unannounced and outside of the factory. Workers do not need to fear or speak out. That really makes sense. So auditing is amazing, but if you can bring it, under the transparency, that would be great. I mean, that would be, a real change start in the factory through auditing.
Okay, Livia, that's a question. There's a question for you. So, what has been the greatest challenge you have found to get brands and individuals to take responsibility for their supply chain? I'm laughing because I know the answer. It was really challenging, but then it's up to you.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is for brands to understand that if they still want to be profitable in the next few years, they have to take care of the people in their supply chain. Otherwise, their business model is dead. And also, this is on the point of view of the brands. From the consumers, the biggest challenge is to make them understand that the fast fashion business model, which is based on exploitation of labor to produce incredibly fast, has been promoted as a democratization of fashion. So what if I don't have money and I can't afford? This is the one line that everyone says, without thinking that 20 years ago when fast fashion didn't exist, we still went along buying and going to parties and work and, but we had a relationship with our clothes which was completely different, that fashion was not equal to disposability, or as I think it was Andrew that said it, or Jessica, fashion was not considered labor was not considered a commodity. So why, and in general, the biggest challenge is to make people link the word dignity and respect with people on the other side of the world. Because if labor was treated like this in Italy, because now we are in Italy, it would be huge news every day. But because it happens in Bangladesh, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in Ethiopia, we simply don't care, or we say, oh, well, So I think maybe in the end it's all the same challenge, but at the core of it, there are human beings, and that's the biggest challenge of all, is that
sometimes you got freezed, but we understood your.
I know, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is terrible.
Don't worry, it's normal for Zoom. Then Andrew, I think that the last question is for you. So have you seen much change in attitudes and also with the situation compared between the true cost and Fashionscapes living wages?
Yeah, I mean, I have and I haven't. I mean, I think like sometimes we can be impatient for good reason because of how high the stakes are and for how profitable the systems are. But I think if I step back and really evaluate it, I think the world is waking up. And to Livia's point, like this is a business model based on the indifference of a whole lot of us. And I think that's wearing thin. And there's some really striking reporting coming out about some serious declines in fast fashion, some serious declines in this kind of ambivalent purchasing an outfit for 1 or 2 outings, discard. Like, when we were doing the true cost, it was like people genuinely hadn't connected the idea of ecological destruction or human rights nightmares to what they were wearing. And I think we've brought that, especially the people on this call, campaigning on this stuff for a long, long time. I think that work is materializing. And I think that gives us a really extraordinary opportunity right now, because it gives us the opportunity to take that consciousness shift, to take that whole generations of people now coming to the table saying, this is profoundly not okay with me. I do not endorse this. I do not support this. Now, those of us close to levers of power, those of us with any kind of influence, which is all of us on this call, it's imperative for us to build on that. And I think a lot of why we're throwing so much support behind what Jessica is doing, always behind what Kalpona is doing, is it's like we got to take these ideas and we have to link them to real, lasting systems change. We have to take that awareness and translate it into action. Because if anything history is really unkind to, it's indifference. And the worst moments in the human story have been marked by times where we've looked away. And, as Livia said, this is human, this is personal, and it's a profoundly exciting proposition to say, not guilt, not shame, but like, look what I get to be a part of. I'm a part of this world for just a few moments. That is my life. And I could with my time, my energy, the way I buy, the conversations I raise, what I share, when I stop that, you know, like that stuff all adds up to be something profound. So I think whoever you are, whether you're someone writing about these issues, whether you're someone who has platform, whether you're someone who buys clothes, which is all of us, just taking agency of the power that we have and using it is what this next chapter is going to be marked by.
Also, can I add one thing that is happening right now? We talked about the effect of the pandemic in Bangladesh and other producers countries last year and brands not paying up. And in spite of the huge campaigns that a lot of NGOs have done to hold brands accountable and make them pay up, is still happening now in India, which is a huge garment producer country, and brands are canceling orders without paying. And well, the garment workers are dying of COVID. And it's frankly shameful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So I have one last question for all of you, and I want a very short but significant answer. So the question, the general question about all this COVID pandemic, do you think that this situation has made people more conscious of their consumption? And do you think that at the end of it, they will really start changing their mood and their consumptions, or they will go back to the previous time? Because we are all also thinking about a kind of renaissance, the roaring 20s. So what's your opinion about that? Livia, I want you to start.
For me, I want to think, because I'm an eternal optimist, that during the pandemic and lockdown, people will have hug rather than the clothes that they couldn't buy. And that this will have them completely look at disposability and fashion in a completely different way. On a more reality check note, because COVID has also created huge problem of poverty all over the world. A lot of people have lost their jobs, and that hopefully people won't buy disposable anymore, but will buy for the long term as an investment, and they will start to treat fashion again in a different way.
Kalpona, what do you think?
Okay, what I think, first of all, I mean, I want basically, but I think it is difficult because I'm not living in a consumer country, I'm in a production country. But what I want, the consumers' behavior need to be changed. COVID definitely, given a scope to think the people that what the essential needs for them. Okay, so what I exactly want that people stop buying the fast fashion and they buy a, the fashion that long lasting, that helps our ecological system and also help workers as well. If we talk about our grandmas, they didn't have like 7 winter coats for their teenage time. They had one, but they have paid enough to the person who made it, and they used for that years. So I want that consumers to reconsider that they make responsible, these brands are paying enough to those sustainable fashion, and a fair share of money goes to the workers. This is what I want, because the fast fashion is not cheap. Someone need to pay for it, and that is workers. Because they are tolling their life with the poverty wages, then the consumer gets $5 euro. It's not free. Somebody paid for it. So fast fashion do not help. So consumers should buy a sustainable clothes. And I'm really thinking that COVID just changed their mind, and this pandemic time, they will be rethinking.
Marisa, what do you think?
Well, I think, and I'm hoping that this last year has made people realize a lot more than just their jobs and the day-to-day. So they really think about, health and the way we live our lives, So I think there's going to be different speeds. I'm an optimistic like Livia, but I think there's going to be countries that will go faster on the change than others. So I think people will be more aware of what they buy, and hopefully buy less but better, even though, yes, there is this renaissance that we're seeing in some countries like the US, where people are just willing to go out and buy a lot. But my belief is that at least this time has made people realize more and more that they're looking for brands with values and with a purpose. And if that is the case, that is going to trigger, obviously, the commitment of those brands with our partners and the production area. And so I believe in this way, this will push to actually make the brands more responsible. So, I think it's coming. It may take a bit more time than we think, and there will be speeds, but brands with values and purpose will make a difference, I believe. And as Livia said, sorry, with this I will finish, like Livia said, if brands don't go that way, they will not exist medium term. Maybe they're doing well now with fast fashion, but eventually they will not exist. They will have to disappear.
Great. Andrew, what's your point of view?
I think that it's given us a window into the reality that the world is not inevitable, that it's been organized by people. We're profoundly aware more than ever that huge mistakes have been made. Those mistakes are there, that's behind us. And now we are left to choose what we do stepping forward. And I think it has reframed serious conversations, profound questions around inequality, not just in production countries and consuming countries, like profound questions that as we step later and later into the capitalism, like, are we going to, as Jessica said, develop economies that serve the needs of people? Or are we going to sort of let them run wild and destroy our natural world and the lives of people? So I'm a storyteller. Stories can change. They often change because people step up and make choices. And I think those choices are going to be the ones that dictate the answer to your question.
Jessica, what's your point of view?
So you shouldn't end with the lawyer. So I would love to feel optimistic, and I would love to agree with all former speakers. And I do believe in the young, and I do believe that stories change. What I have noticed over the past 4 years is that experience doesn't necessarily seem to lead to empathy, or rather, experience doesn't seem to teach people empathy. People either have empathy or they don't. At least that's my experience. And I'll tell you a bit sort of bad side of stories. I live near a very, very large park in London. And during the pandemic, it was always full of people walking, big families and groups and couples walking, and the paths were chewed into mud. And the day that Oxford Street opened, it was no longer full of people, it was empty. So as soon as the shops opened, people returned, which was kind of disappointing. I think that we can't put this all on consumers. I think that the power of advertising, the power of peer pressure, the power of just the simple joy of consumption, just as you want to eat, you want to consume, it's a very natural instinct. And I do think that in the end, we do actually need rules to help us all live better lives and respect each other. So that's the ending from a lawyer.
I do agree, thank you. I do agree with you a lot. But at the same time, I'm really optimistic like Livia. And I always say that when we keep the conversation, let me use a strong word, sexy. As Stella McCartney always repeats, we are more able to conquest more consumers and raise their attention. I think we need to be smart, even if we are talking about, I mean, very dramatic matters. But that's the most important challenge of our time. Sustainability, it's not only about the world and the planet, it's about human beings. It's about us. And I think that, I believe that a human consumption is possible and maybe is inevitable at the same time. So let me, Livia, do you want to say anything else at the end of our beautiful conversation?
Yes, Simone, I want to thank you for being a wonderful, wonderful moderator, for having hosted us today. I'm incredibly grateful. And to your last point now that, you know, if we make it glamorous and sexy, and I don't think there is anyone else in the world more than you that can do that. So the fact that you accepted to do this today and to host us and speak to us and amplify this message, you know, is amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you to you all. I want to leave this beautiful panel. I always say that I'm a very lucky person because I hear voices and stories. And voices and stories really, that's my point of view, are really able to change the world. And we have to invest on them. Even if sometimes experience doesn't teach empathy. That's totally true. But I'm a fighter. We are a fight. We are all fighters. And we will keep on fighting because it's the fight that we have to do. And at the end, I want to leave all you and all of our audience with one of the most beautiful phrases that you have said in our panel, that fashion without sustainability is irresponsibility. I want a t-shirt, a shirt with this written on. I think it's really important. If you are paying a cheap price for something, that means that some human being is paying a higher, incredible price. So thank you very much for being part of the change. The world needs your example, your commitment, your work. So keep on doing it without any doubts, even when, I mean, we will be back to consumption again. So thank you very much again. And I hope to see you soon for another panel and maybe in a better world. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.